panic and doom, and I had to stop and just kind of stand there. And of course, she tried to put her arm around me, and I was just like, I can't be touched. And yeah, it's been really hard. It's been difficult. Yeah, I think the anxiety's getting worse. Just unexpected, attacks.
Was the grocery store unexpected? Okay. Was there something at the grocery store that reminded you of something, or what do you think? What do you think brought the panic on when you were there, if anything?
I'm not really sure. I mean, my husband used to get mad at me if I would bring home the wrong things. If he asked for, something and I didn't bring home the right brand that he wanted, even though it was the right, right item, it just wasn't the right brand. And I think that would, throw him maybe into a trigger and for no reason. If I forgot something, of course, that would be really, really difficult. Just put me in a bad situation. He would usually freak out.
Okay. So a little bit of panic during the week. What else? Any other significant events? Any things go on this last week that might be good to bring up and since we last talked?
I think that was mostly just the not sleeping well and just the unexpected panic that's new and just I don't know, it's been really hard.
Okay. Nightmares been recurrent still? Okay.
Yeah, it wakes me up at night and then I have trouble getting back to sleep because I'm just so aroused and awake and my heart's racing and just just feeling a little unsafe, not being able to trust my environment, even though he's not there right now, just not being able to really let my guard down in my environment.
Sounds really taxing.
It is.
It sounds emotionally taxing. I imagine all that exhibits a lot of energy to feel like that all the time, every day. That must be tiring. Well, I don't know if you remember, but last week we talked a little bit, and I explained I was going to ask you a lot of questions. A lot of these questions came from a screening about really this specific event in your life, and the way and manner that you answered those questions led me to believe there could be some significant trauma that has happened through this event with your husband. You described last week feeling panic, shortness of breath, periodic nightmares, having different outbursts of anger. You felt jumpy, you said. You said you've been having some difficulty concentrating. You even mentioned that you've been finding yourself avoiding people, avoiding things that you normally like to do, but you weren't doing anymore. You just felt like avoiding them. You also talked about having some difficulty being touched. You were before, you said you're very scared of your husband who's abused you for, and correct me if I'm wrong, 7 years? Okay. After that, remember we talked a little bit about post-traumatic stress disorder. Do you remember anything I said about that last week?
Well, I said it's actually kind of common. I think you said people that have had symptoms for, or it was 6 or 7 weeks.
Oh, bless you.
Thank you. But just that it was really common, and kind of recurring. I mean, living the events, but just sounds like me,
Okay. Yeah, and I remember you said that you didn't like to be labeled, so I asked you what you feel about that, and you said, I don't really like to be labeled. And then I discussed how this is just a term that counselors will use to describe a cluster of symptoms, right? All these things that you told me about, the avoidance, the anger, the jumpiness, the concentrating, the heartbeats going fast, the panic, all that stuff. That's putting all those things together. We've been able to, we call it PTSD. Okay. So we ended up discussing at the end of that how there's hope, that millions of people experience PTSD a year, and that people can get better. And so I hope, if anything, last week that you were able to walk away with a feeling of progress can be made with this. Okay. Maybe in between? Okay. So I wanted to begin today, now that we talked a little bit, about just talk a little bit more about trauma and the way it overwhelms people. There's really 3 ways trauma can overwhelm somebody, mentally, emotionally, and even physically. I like to sometimes say stress is not necessarily traumatic, but trauma is stressful, right? So not all stress leads to trauma, but trauma is definitely stressful. There's kind of a nice little picture and a graph I'd like to show you and kind of draw this out here. This is what's called the modulation model, and you kind of have 2 areas here. You have this line, in between these 2 lines, you have what kind of looks like an EKG almost, and this is the area that most of us operate, the stress we operate in. Now this upper line we have called high arousal, and this bottom line we call low arousal. Okay. In normal stress, somebody will hover in between both of these. Okay. A normal person will handle stress and stay in between both of these. Now, a person who's traumatized can often find themselves moving outside of these 2 lines. Okay, so here's your hyperarousal state. Now I want you to notice how the line goes above it and then dips back down into hypoarousal, okay, or numbing or freezing. Stays down here, comes back up, goes back into hyperarousal, heart palpitating, panic, all these things that you described, and back in. This person has difficulty managing the emotions and staying inside the normal threshold. Okay, this is how somebody who experiences some trauma in their life, this is sort of how they can function. They can go up and down this way. Now, in just talking to you for a short time last week and doing that screening, you exhibited to me a lot of symptoms of hyperarousal. Mm-hmm. Okay, so some of the hyperarousal things: insomnia, right? Hypervigilance, dissociation, aggressiveness. Now down to the hypoarousal stage, going down here, you have more difficulty being passive, lack of awareness, numbness. Do you ever experience numbness? Just kind of emotionally numb, a little bit? Okay. You talked about wanting to isolate more, a little bit, social isolation. So a person can go up and down. You find yourself going kind of up from there, down, up and down on those levels. Okay. So these are normal reactions, okay, to very abnormal events. Okay, so what you're experiencing can be very normal if there's trauma, even though the events are abnormal. Okay, so I've said the word dissociation. Have you heard that term before? Okay, so I noticed that even when we were talking, I noticed your eyes appeared a little glazed, and you would look sort of off this direction or that direction while I was talking, and then I just kind of would bring you back. Okay, that's what we call, and it's called dissociation. It's kind of a temporary detachment from the events that are going on around us. Okay, and that's kind of like that's a way also to separate oneself from emotional experience, physical or emotional experience. Now I don't know, did you notice that at that moment? Did you feel like you zoned out there for a minute?
A little bit.
A little minute? Okay. Okay. So as we continue to work in this trauma and talk through things, you're going to notice, you may notice that feelings get difficult, and it's going to bring up things, and just by talking about them, you're going to feel like you might be re-experiencing some of these things. Okay. And you can feel like you're going through this thing all over again. Okay.
Makes me feel anxious just, talking about going through it again, and
yeah. Okay. Is it the thought of bringing up these memories again that's making you feel anxious? Okay. So, and this is a good place to talk about. Whenever doing any kind of trauma work, one of the first things we work on is establishing a safe place. Okay. Do you know what I mean by a safe place? Okay. You ever had anywhere you could go in your life that was safe for you?
Like while I was married, or?
Sure, or before you were married, yeah.
Well, my mom liked to garden, and she had this beautiful vegetable garden when I was little, and so I used to like to walk through it and just look at the vegetables.
Mm-hmm.
That was always a peaceful place.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
What was the feeling of being in the vegetable garden? Name me a few of the feelings you had when you walked through there.
It was tranquil. It was peaceful. I felt connected, to nature. I felt loved.
Mm-hmm.
Because I knew that she was growing the vegetables, to feed our family because we were really poor, and so. Yeah, she would spend a lot of time, growing produce for us so we could have some good food to eat.
Mm-hmm.
So just, safe.
It was safe for you. Okay. So even now when you think about the vegetable garden and you talk about it, what are the feelings going on inside you right now?
It feels good.
Feels good to talk about it, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Even though you're not there, it's very interesting that just talking about it can make you feel good, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So this is kind of what establishing a safe place is about. Okay. So safety has to come from within and in our environment. And one of the ways we do this is I like to sometimes help people run through an exercise just to practice this. Okay. Would you be willing to do something like this with me now?
Yeah, I mean, if the emotions get too bad, can we stop, or what do we do?
Yes.
I get a little nervous about, just.
Anytime you feel like it's too much, too difficult,
Mm-hmm.
you say stop and we'll take a moment. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
The idea is once we do this, in this exercise, that it'll be a good positive feeling for you, that anytime you do it in the future, it will reinforce that good feeling. Okay. So let's go ahead and do that. Just go ahead and get comfortable. Just kind of allow yourself to be comfortable in the chair and allow yourself, your feet to go ahead and touch the ground.
Okay.
And if you'd like to, you can close your eyes and just kind of go along. You won't be interrupted for a little while. And let's just get started. As you're starting to breathe, I want you to bring your attention to the direct experience of your breath.